Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because folks, life's too short to be miserable. Hey, Inspiring Possible listeners, welcome back to the Inspiring Possible party, or at least that's what I'm calling it today because we got to have a party. So I'm really excited today about the guest that I have because I got to know her probably maybe a year or two ago. We were able to meet and I got to know a little bit more about her and what she's passionate about and just have gotten to go this journey with her, even though she lives very, very far away from me in a whole different part of the country. But we were talking maybe about a few months ago and I was kind of saying, you know what, I really think that you need to come on the podcast so that we can kind of talk a little bit about your zone of genius. So today I have Kerrie Toole with me, and her zone of genius, not only is she a licensed independent clinical social worker, also a CEO guru of a counseling practice. She also has a unique perspective on the world because of her work with people and then her understanding of herself. So I asked hey, will you come talk? Because she recently launched a podcast called It Makes Sense That You Feel That Way or This Way.
This way.
So if you're a person that you're like, I don't understand why I'm feeling this way. And it doesn't seem like anybody else is concerned or feeling the same. So that is if that is you and you're like, yes, I go through life and feel completely different than the people in my family or people that I'm moving around with at work or just in my life, then stay tuned because we're going to talk about kind of people that maybe have a unique sensitivity that other people may not have. And how do you understand it and how do you move through it? So welcome, Kerrie.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. So just tell me a little bit about this, because I know we were talking before we pushed the button that this is your passion area. And I'm just curious to know the story of how this became something that you're like, I really want to shout it from the rooftops to help people understand if they feel like they're more sensitive or more attuned or more emotional. I don't know how you want to say it. You okay. And this is how, so it makes sense.
Right. Exactly. Well, I knew since I was the age of 12 that I wanted to be a therapist. I just have a natural empathy for people. I feel connected to people. When I was younger, I noticed that my emotions tended to be bigger than other people's. And I also grew up in a very Irish household, if you will. There's a cultural component where we don't talk about feelings in my in my household. It just was not addressed, and I had all these big feelings and felt like I needed to suppress them because the people in my environment weren't really receptive to that. And then I went out and became a therapist. And what do I do all day? I talk about feelings, right? So there's my, right? Like embracing the thing that's causing me discomfort, right? Which is what I teach people to do now. And in therapy school, I took a class in dialectical behavior therapy, which is a form of treatment initially designed just for suicidal and self-harming individuals and people with very big, risky, intense, dangerous, dysregulated behaviors. And the format of the treatment protocol looks at, a lot of things that happen with people who just tend to have a higher sensitivity to emotion. As I'm learning this treatment protocol, I'm looking at some of these factors, and in some ways I'm really relating to it as I kind of mature into my career. And I'm like, wait a second, this is how I feel. Right? Yes. Yeah. I have big emotions. I feel things that other people don't feel. I feel oftentimes like the world is invalidating me in a way, like there's something wrong with me. And so I've been able to kind of take it out of the therapeutic lens, because not everybody needs that level of intervention, right? If you're suicidal, self-harming, risky behaviors, yeah, go for DBT. But a lot of us just navigate the world with this higher sensitivity to emotion and don't realize it. And we internalize it and we think there's something wrong with us. So I've totally embraced this. And I use it a lot in the work I do with family members and parents. I see a lot of teenagers doing DBT. And so I teach this to parents and I teach this to kids and adults about like, you tend to be wired this way. And we think it's something that's bad or problematic. And if we can reframe it, it's actually a gift.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about this because I can even think of myself, and maybe
Yeah.
it's a characteristic of,
Therapist.
I don't
Yes.
know.
Oh yeah. It's a spectrum.
There's a spectrum. We're all kinds of people out there, right? And that's what makes, I think the art of therapy very unique and individualized, because not only is the person that's doing that job is very unique and individual, but the person you're working with is very unique and individualized.
Exactly.
But as you're talking, I'm like, oh yes, I'm thinking about some experiences I had recently where I really had some uncomfortable emotions. And like you said, if you're grown up in an environment, and I don't think that was necessarily my case, but I do think there were times where I pushed down a lot of those emotions.
Right.
Because, and I think, going through therapy school, sometimes you're taught to even neutralize your own emotions so that you can be with somebody in the therapy process.
Right.
But I'm curious, how do you help people manage the discomfort of having big emotions?
Yeah.
Where do we start, Kerrie?
Right. Exactly. And where I usually start with people is science. Okay. Because for a lot of people, they think that, and their environment has sometimes taught them that you're being dramatic. You're blowing this out of proportion. Like this is a behavior that you're choosing to do, or you're choosing to make yourself so upset about this, right? Because the environment doesn't actually experience emotions the way that we high sensitivity people feel, right? And so I like starting off with the scientific aspects of having a high sensitivity to emotion, because for a lot of people, it's so validating that this isn't something that I'm doing wrong and I'm the bad guy. This is something that this is how my brain is built. And this is how my system is built. Yeah. Because this is a game changer for family after family after family. One thing that they have discovered about people with high emotional sensitivity. So in DBT, one of the predominant diagnoses that we work with is something called borderline personality disorder. And there's been a lot of research on the disorder itself. And there's a lot of things that kind of can touch that disorder in different ways. And so some science that's come out in the recent years, and DBT was kind of based on this theory, is that people who have a higher sensitivity to emotion, they put them in a functional MRI and elicited some emotions. And what they saw is that people with a higher sensitivity to emotion have a smaller and more densely packed amygdala. So that is your fight or flight. That's your emotional reactivity. That's your threat assessment, scanning your environment, right? Danger, looking for danger kind of a thing. And so if it's smaller and more densely packed, for these folks, it's like a firecracker and it takes next to nothing to set that puppy off. Right?
Yeah, no room for it to
right. Exactly. So one thing happens and this amygdala just like, right, explodes. And so it's actually a biological thing that some people have this higher sensitivity, right? And what I've seen over the past 24 years of working with high sensitivity people and being a high sensitivity person too, is that it's not just the amygdala for people with high sensitivity, it's systemic. We have higher rates of inflammatory disorders. There's been recent research about rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, allergies, asthma, skin sensitivities, migraines, epilepsy, what else? GI issues, just in general. What was the other one? Oh, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So lots and lots of inflammatory. I think lupus was on the list as well. So PCOS, fibromyalgia, like inflammatory conditions just happen
just
to
a lot
be
of ways it shows up in your body.
exactly. So this is just how we're wired. We're just wired to be more sensitive to our environment, more sensitive externally and internally. And so if we have, and I'll say to people in the room with me when they're first coming in, I'm like, and this is also in terms of feelings. Some people don't pick up other people's feelings, right? And some people just feel all the feelings in the room, right? And that's those of us who are empaths, right?
It can be overwhelming.
So,
Right?
is this like, yeah, exactly. Like you walk in and you feel everything in the room, right? And as a therapist, like we're trained to tune in on that, right? We can use it to benefit our treatment protocol just when we know what's ours and what's not ours, right? But when people have this, I always say to people, can you tell who the bad guy is in a movie before the plot twist? Right? Can you feel what other people are feeling without them having to say anything to you? Right? Do you feel bigger than other people? And if the answer is yes, I'm like, welcome to the club. You've got a sensitivity superpower. You just don't know how to harness it yet. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So this can be, when we're talking about it, I know and I can think about even as parenting, right? And my experience in parenting and probably having a sensitivity superpower, it's a little bit myself and then really with a child,
Definitely.
it can be hard to navigate this
Yes.
because sometimes when we're moving so busy through life, it's like, I don't have time for your emotions right now. Okay.
Right.
And that can then obviously send messages
Mm-hmm.
to somebody that we love that their emotions are not okay,
Right.
are not welcome here,
Right.
and they need to figure out a way to manage it and move along.
Right.
Right.
And so yeah.
So how do you help people realize that when they may have been receiving messages, and I'm going to give some grace to parents because parents, we're just trying to do our best.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
100%.
It can be challenging to even parent children with big emotions, right? But how do you help not only the individual themselves, whether they're a teen, adult, whoever, that may be more have this sensitivity superpower, and then how do you help the people that are like, loving the people with the sensitivity superpower?
Exactly. And the family members and the loved ones and the friends, right? They're all doing things with the best of intentions, right? And trying to support and trying to guide, and they don't get that for the high sensitivity person. The emotions are on such a larger scale. So they'll say things like, it's not that big a deal, right? It's okay. Right? They're trying to comfort, they're trying to give perspective, they're trying to even give skills, right? For high sensitivity people, if you go to a cognitive behavior therapist who's going to be saying, okay, change your mindset, change the way you're thinking, change these behaviors that you're doing, the high sensitivity person is going to hear, oh, what I'm feeling is wrong. Right? And so they're going to really internalize that. So and then kind of say, well, I need to shut this down. I'm avoiding my emotions, right?
And then
because
we know what happens when people avoid, Kerrie. What happens?
You can only do that for so long until things get really exciting, right?
Yeah.
And it comes out sideways. It always comes out sideways, right? And then the environment responds and says, oh my gosh, we didn't know it was that bad. And then the person with the high sensitivity says, oh, this is what it takes for me to get my needs met. Right? And everyone, again, is working with the best of intentions just to trying to get their needs met. So when I talk with the people in the environment, right, I talk with them, parents, loved ones, whatever it may be, teachers, like I do trainings at schools all the time too, talking about how can we recognize that we want to be cautious not to negate somebody's feelings or to minimize the effort it takes to feel differently. I use a metaphor a lot of people with high emotional sensitivity are trying to navigate the world with an emotional third degree burn. This is a metaphor we use in DBT all the time, right? We just feel things more painfully than other people do, right? And it's not that we're being dramatic or obnoxious or manipulative, it takes more effort, right? And if we've been saying to ourselves, what I'm feeling is wrong, we're going to suppress it and avoid it. So I tell family members, okay, the thing that really is going to help in these situations and is going to make things move faster, right? If you got to get out the door and your kid's having a meltdown, right? Like trying to come at it in a really like strict approach. I mean, we still have to have rules and expectations, et cetera. But if we lead with validating the emotions, even if we don't get it, right? So even if we can say, you're having a lot of big feelings right now, right? I can see why you would be so upset about this. This is really stressful. And then just wait a beat and let that kind of sit. And then we often will go to, but we got to get out the door, but we got to do this thing, but we got to focus on that. And that word but completely invalidates the first thing you just said, right? So we want to take that word but out of our vocabulary, because now you just invalidated your kid by accident with the best of intentions, right? You want to replace that with the word and. You're having some big emotions, and we've got to get to this appointment on time.
Yeah. And I think what you just said is something that I have seen, and even in my own life, that
Totally.
is challenging for a lot of people. And that is to validate the emotion of whoever it is in your life, even if it does not make sense to you.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times I have observed, again, myself included.
We've all been there.
We've all been there, us trying to reason away a feeling.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That doesn't make sense. So we try to reason that why you're exploding right now and just so emotionally dysregulated is because it doesn't have a valid reason. So you should stop.
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly. And even, well-intentioned people will say, well, why are you so upset? Trying to find the reason. And half the time there is no reason. It's just the feelings are just that big.
And the reality is when you're in that emotional state, I mean, you're not thinking about what triggered this or what the reason was or how you got here to begin with. You're just in the feeling.
Exactly. It's literally two different parts of the brain, right? So when your amygdala and your emotion centers are activated, that whole logic part of the brain, nowhere to be found. Right. So a lot of my clients sometimes will try to come in, or the parents will come in trying to like problem solve or figure out. And I'm like, you're thinking your feelings. You can't think your feelings. Two different parts of your brain. Feel your feelings. And even if they're completely like not to scale of the situation, it's okay that you feel that. It's not a horrible thing. The feelings are not the problem. The feelings are going to be there no matter what, right? We can use the feelings to inform us rather than acting on impulse to get away from them, to shut them down, to invalidate them, to stuff them away, right? To self-blame, to blame others, right? If we can say, I'm really outraged right now about what's happening, and it's okay that I feel this way. I can sit in my feelings, and my feelings are not bad. They're uncomfortable. They're painful, but they're not bad. They're trying to help me.
Well, and how do you help people get to the point where they understand their sensitivity superpower and then they can actually look at it that way as feelings are informing me versus feelings, I have to manage these feelings.
Right, right. Well, it's the narrative that they have to start building for themselves, right? Because the world, again, is a very invalidating place. And I'm not just talking about like, families doing the best they can, schools doing the best they can. Like the world at large has a lot of judgment in it, right? And saying you're too dramatic, et cetera, et cetera. We have to start having a different narrative of, okay, this is painful and it's okay that I'm feeling this. And what is my system trying to tell me, right? And, when I'm working with my clients, that's a constant question that I'm asking them. What's your body telling you? What's your gut telling you? Right. And you can turn it toward yourself. Like, what's my body telling me? What's my system telling me? Right. Every emotion has a job to do. Right. So
and it's there for a reason. But like you
there.
said, we get so much invalidation, like you said, the world at large. And this is for, like you said, we're going to highlight this probably 5 million times while we're on this thing.
Yeah.
Is that we all kind of do it, and it's not that we're doing it with ill intention. And I always think that when you do this, you have to remind yourself, what is my intent? And I don't believe, like you said, most people are walking around trying to invalidate somebody and how they feel. Okay.
Exactly.
So that's disclaimer.
Right.
You know, we'll probably say
we're all doing the best we can with what we've got and what we learned.
The best. That's
right. What did we learn about being parents?
That's right.
Right.
We learn through doing.
Right.
But what you're talking about is that for so long, I can see people, and it depends on how you're raised and the experiences you have, again, with the outside world. But I would guess that most people start to form narratives about their feelings and either shut down them, avoid them. Sometimes it just go with them, but then wants to avoid the aftermath of when the feelings just,
the fallout,
just came all out. But I do find that there's a disconnect that is hard for us to understand, that the feelings are telling us a story.
Right.
So how do we listen better to what our feelings and our body and our gut are trying to tell us without just rationalizing it away?
Right. Right. So we really do have to get in touch with our bodies. And so what we do in DBT is mindfulness practices. Right. And the more that we can practice, being able to control where our mind is, what we choose to put our focus on, right? Like, we can go toward that painful tightness in our bellies and have curiosity about it, right? If we're able to just be mindful of it and aware of it without judgment, without trying to rush through it, without trying to fix it, right? It's the acceptance of what is, even if somebody else's experience is going to be different. And of course, it's going to be different, right? And that's a big thing that high sensitivity people have learned through their life, is they self-invalidate. There's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be feeling this. Shut it down. So if we can teach them how to be aware and mindful and accepting and validate, oh, my head is starting to pound, or I'm getting that, my heart is starting to race, and that awareness and that acceptance of those things. And they're not bad. They're just signals. Right. And we can sit
just
in
signals. It's neutral. It's neutral. It's just a signal. Yeah.
It's just a signal, right? A friend of mine at the office uses this great metaphor of if anyone has dogs at home, right? So you've got your pets, you've got your dogs, and the Amazon delivery person comes up to the door to deliver a package. What do your dogs do? Bark, right? They're like, oh my gosh, there's a human. What do we do? Right? They panic. And they put us on alert, right? They're raising the alarm. We as the humans, those are our emotions, right? That's how primal the emotions are. They're just our alert system. They're a system to tell us something about ourselves or something about what's happening, right? And then we humans look and we notice the alert, and then we look outside the window, we see the delivery truck, and we're like, oh, that's what's happening. Okay. We can do that with our human brain, with our prefrontal cortex. That's the reasoning part of the brain, right? But we can only do that when we've learned how to hear the emotions when they alert and not suppress them. Then we can say, okay, I'm noticing this alert. I'm feeling what I'm feeling. It's okay that I feel it. What else is going on?
Yeah, just that awareness. And like you said, it sounds like changing the self narrative from being more critical of feeling a certain way to being aware and accepting of, this is the way I feel. There is something going on here. And, I know some of this, Kerrie, but I just even myself, I'm going to normalize this for you people out there that's listening, that you're like, okay, this sounds well and good, but this is a practice because we all have our own set of feelings. We all have our unique set of experiences. And I know that for me, and then some of these patterns that we've learned and that we've done for so long, whether it be shoving down emotions, avoiding the discomfort. I'm a big avoider, Kerrie. Okay, just in case you're wondering. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to sit with that feeling today. That
fine.
is uncomfortable. I want to have fun. This is not fun. This really makes me feel whatever. But it is what I found people struggle with is when they do have that awareness and they have that acceptance is also having some compassion on themselves for the discomfort that they may be experiencing. And like you said, how do you get people to not, how to uncouple that identity of like this feeling and this is me, you know, because so many people assign, you know, like you said, judgment to their self.
Right.
How do you get them to separate and realize, you know, this is a feeling that's giving you some signal.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that if you get angry all the time that you're necessarily a bad person or something's wrong with you or that you're broken.
Right.
But that you're experiencing this emotion for some reason. And so how do you help? Because I mean, I know this is hard for people. Okay.
Yeah.
This is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for people to really have that, not only the awareness and the acceptance, but also the grace for themselves.
Right.
So how do you help them switch that narrative to a more loving narrative?
Right. So it's being able to say to ourselves, I'm doing the best I can with what I've learned so far. And at the same time, as I learn different skills, I'll be able to change things moving forward. Right. I did the best I could in the moment I was in with what I knew at the time.
Yeah. And we can't go back.
Can't go back.
Can we, Kerrie? Have you found the time machine?
I have not found the time machine. Not yet. Not yet.
Even if I found one, I think it'd be kind of scary because I don't know if you ever watched that movie Butterfly Effect.
No.
A long time ago.
I don't think
it was
so.
like in the 90s with like Ashton Kutcher or whatever, I think. And he like tried to change the timeline of his life. Okay, I'm really getting on a bunny trail here, but, you know, I guess he would try to change it. And then there would always be these other things that he didn't foresee that would happen. And sometimes not great things. But all that to say, folks, we cannot go back.
Right.
We can only go forward.
Right.
So, you know, realizing you did the best you could with what you had. And then what, Kerrie?
And then having that compassion to yourself, right? And not self-blaming, not blaming others. Really hard to do. Right? Find yourself a good therapist if this is a struggle point for you, right? To help you walk this journey with you, right? So being able to say, like, I did what I could at the time. And the people around me did what they could at the time. And as we learn more about ourselves, as we develop more insight, as I learn how to value this high sensitivity, and know that just because I have a big feeling doesn't mean I have to act on it. I can feel it and embrace it and sit with it and resist whatever urges I have to, you know, punch walls or start flipping tables or tell somebody off or not get out of bed for 3 days, right? I'll have those urges. Of course I will. Right. And I don't have to act on them. I can embrace the feeling because the feelings are telling me something. So let's dig into what the feelings are telling me. Right. And it's so hard
with it. Yes.
It's so hard.
I mean, what is your, I know there's a lot of strategies you help people figure out, but and I know it is sometimes mindfulness, but what's the one thing that you would say, like, that you tell people to how to sit with their feelings? How does one sit with feelings they do not like?
That's exactly it, right? To welcome them in as friends. They're trying to help you, right? So it's really
like, welcome on in, friends. Come on, I embrace you.
Right.
I embrace you.
Right. Like, I don't know how much you talked about Brene Brown and her research and her approach on this podcast, but
we haven't talked tons about it. So go
ahead. Really? Oh my gosh. So she has a whole career based on shame. Right. And the power of vulnerability is the thing that combats shame. Right. So the power of being able to say, I feel this and it sucks, and is the thing that is going to allow you to have freedom from that thing.
Yeah.
Right. So we say sometimes if you listen to your emotions when they're whispering, they're not going to scream to get your attention. Right. So if you listen to it when it's small, you're heading off a bigger issue later on. And I'll say to people, after listening to Brene Brown, like, shame is my favorite emotion. I hate it. Right. Exactly. Shame screams at me to say that I'm not acting in alignment with my values. Right. And that's a gut check that I need to step back and say, ooh, okay, my system is telling me something about myself. Right. And embrace that shame. And then it doesn't perseverate. It doesn't last. It doesn't cycle through and come back and kick me in the teeth later on. Right. I deal with it when it's small.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I can think about a big emotion I went through recently about something, a choice I had to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could remember the choice was causing me to feel very unsettled and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to do what you are talking about. I had to accept and be aware that, okay, I'm having this discomfort. Where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And then once I was able to be aware of like, oh, this is what the thing is that I don't like.
Yeah.
Then it did help me to at least, it didn't make the feeling go away.
Of course.
But it's like, okay, this is the reason why I'm feeling this is because there's this misalignment that's happening. Right. And I have to be aware of that. And if I don't do something about it, even if I don't want to do this thing, then I'm going to have greater internal conflict.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And more of that emotion. So I love how you said, listen to the whisper. And folks, if you have never listened to the whisper of your feelings, I mean, you may not be hearing it until it gets real loud.
Totally.
But as you're telling me this metaphor, what I'm thinking is you might have to listen to it loud first, and then hopefully you can train yourself to listen to whenever it's just trying to nudge you a little bit.
Exactly. And that takes practice. And it takes rehearsal, right?
So what are the gifts of having this sensitivity superpower?
Yeah. I was actually just going to turn the conversation right to that, right? Because, when we know how to tune into ourselves, we can differentiate what's mine and what's not mine. We can walk into that room where tension is somewhere and figure out, okay, that's not my tension. Somebody's really uncomfortable. What can I do? How can I use this information to put someone at ease or to leverage a deal I'm making or get what I want out of the situation in an effective, skillful way? And, how can we communicate if I can kind of have a gut check about how somebody else is feeling, right? Now, not everybody can do this. And this was like a light bulb moment for me when I realized that I feel things that other people don't experience. And it sounds hokey, right? But those of us with this high sensitivity to emotion, we really can read somebody else's experience to some level, right? We're not psychic by any means, but, I can be in a family session and a family member can say something to another family member and they take it in a way that they felt hurt, and I can feel it. I feel the gut punch and I'm like, ooh, hang on, back up. Right? So this is actually giving me, as an empath, as a highly sensitive person, I get more information about my environment than a typically wired person. So I am entering into situations more informed.
Yeah.
Right.
So the superpower is to read the room without nobody saying anything. It's
exactly.
really what it is. Like you're able to read the room just from your, perception of feeling is really what it is, right? Is you're perceiving the feelings that are going around in the room and you're attuned to that.
Yep.
And then that way you can meet people where they are really. And then also validate the feelings they have.
Yes.
Or if there's something that you're not in agreement with, that's not yours, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, then you can make the choice to move away from it.
Yeah, exactly. And once you know how to harness your own stuff, you can do that with other people, like interpersonally, right?
Yeah.
And know that when other people do say things that we perceive as invalidating, they don't have this gift necessarily. So they don't know how their words are impacting us. right? And to be able to not take
feeling
it
how you're responding to that. Yeah.
Exactly. So in a way, part of the gift is like knowing what emotions are mine, not taking it personally, right? Like I'm married to an engineer. If anyone knows any engineers out there, they're very logical. Yeah.
My dad is an engineer.
Yes.
Dad, if you're listening.
Yes.
Yes. Very logical. Very
Right.
logical.
Very logical.
And
My husband,
very aware of like if this if you do, but more on a logical basis, not and
right, not in a gut feeling kind of a way, but they notice like discrepancies or how things don't match up or like things that are
to detail.
Yes.
Of, logic based detail.
Right. And that's a gift too. And that's a gift that I don't have. Right. So my marriage is this great blend of I hold the emotions and my husband holds the logic. And we've been able to like communicate in a way where we appreciate what the other person's bringing to the table. And I know if I'm feeling crummy, I'm not going to get validation from him because he can't do it.
Yeah. And he may not be aware. I mean,
he
at
isn't.
this point he may be, but he may not be. He might have to say, I'm feeling crummy right now.
Right.
I just want to let you know.
Right.
If I am snippy, it is because I'm doing X, Y, I'm feeling X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I have to hold on to knowing that I have, I'm on the spectrum of feeling all the emotions and he's in the spectrum of having, he still has emotions, obviously, just they don't impact him as much as they impact me. Right.
Yeah. He can move through it with logic and it's not as over. Whenever we're talking about the sensitivity superpower, I can think of a lot of people. And I think it's just, they're able to move through what makes sense logically and rationally. And this sensitivity superpower, you move through the world with what makes sense feeling wise.
Exactly.
If this doesn't feel good, that's informing me. If this makes me feel great, this is informing me.
Yes.
So it's how it almost sounds like as we're verbally processing this, how you receive information and what you do with that information.
Yep. Exactly. And so we high sensitivity people, we receive information internally, right? Our systems tell us something about the world. Right. Whereas my husband, the engineer, will look at the world and just look at data and facts. And it's just how he's built. There's no right. There's no wrong. Right. It's just that
understanding how you're built.
Exactly. Exactly.
People are built differently than you. Which I'll be honest with you, Kerrie, I think one of the gifts of being in this therapist role throughout the years is I remember, again, we all grow up in our own heads, you know what I mean? Like in ourselves, and you move through the world thinking, at least I did, that people, even though you see the differences, maybe there's physical differences and you can see some environmental differences and maybe language, but I just thought that people thought like me.
Same.
and then when I got in the therapy room and I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh my gosh, we are so diverse. We think so differently. Like you said at the beginning, our amygdalas are different. The way we process information is different. The way we communicate is so different. And it's a combination of like everything from nature to nurture, an environment. And it's just crazy. But, if you grow around in this world thinking that, everyone is like you or should be like you, then that can create a lot of conflict. But the more you are aware of who you are is what I guess will, who you are and how you show up in the world will ultimately help you harness those uniquenesses about you. And if it's a sensitivity superpower, it's learning how to harness that. But then also, how do you interact with people that maybe have different superpowers than you?
Right. Exactly. Not everybody's going to have the same superpower. They have a different superpower. Right. And one metaphor that I really use often is, bringing in movies, right. And people who are first discovering their superpower. Right. So if you've ever seen an origin movie, superhero movie, where the superhero first gets their superpower, do they know how to use it right away?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
They don't.
No, they don't.
What happens at first?
They mess a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, they do. It's like mass destruction, right? And that's what happens if you don't know how to harness your superpower, right? You have the superpower that you don't know how to harness yet. You don't know how to use it. And then as you go through being able to tune into yourself, validate yourself, recognize that you have this gift that other people don't have, and it's informing you, and it's wonderful and sometimes painful at the same time. It still hurts, and it's going to hurt us a lot more than it hurts other people going through the same thing. We have a larger scale of emotion than other people do, right? Like it's almost like, I'm using a metaphor within a metaphor, but color blindness, right? So some of us have really, really fine-tuned color, and some people are colorblind, right? So I have the gift of having that really, really fine-tuned emotional experiencing. I feel more than other people do. I get more out of life than some other people do. And that is a gift. And once I know how to harness that gift, to go back to the superhero reference, I can use it when I choose to.
Yeah. And then superhero reference, you can use it for good.
Exactly. I became a therapist, right? Yay. I'm helping other people harness their superpowers,
and
right? It's the ripple effect.
On this podcast about how we can harness our superpowers.
Exactly.
It's so true. And I don't think most of us don't always walk around with like, yeah, I have a superpower. Mm-hmm. But the reality is you do. And it is discovering what your superpower is. Mm-hmm. And whether it's like a high sensitivity to emotion, whether it's a logical brain, whether it's, an awareness of things that other people might not have, whether it's a gift or talent, I don't know. The sky, it's a whole bunch of different things you could do.
Exactly.
But once you know what your superpower is, or just how you show up and operate in the world, the more you can then not only acknowledge yourself for the unique, awesome person you are, but then the second thing you can do is use that superpower to be able to be of service, or to be able to help people, or to be able, what this podcast is about, create possibilities. So
exactly.
I'm loving this conversation. And hopefully maybe for somebody out there, they're like, Kerrie has been speaking to me.
I get that a lot.
Yes, that she sees me. So, Kerrie, if people are wanting to find out more about like just understanding themselves, if they resonated with this conversation, how can people find out more about this? Or get in contact with you?
Sure. Yeah. So, I have a podcast out that I've recently launched. It is, yay! So it is designed to speak to the high sensitivity individual and to the family members and loved ones of the high sensitivity individual, to go like in deeper dives of some of the concepts that we've touched upon here. The name of the podcast is called It Makes Sense That You Feel This Way. It talks a lot about the biology, talks a lot about the background, talks a lot about how trauma can impact people with high sensitivity, and the things that loved ones and family members can do or say or approach to try to be part of that validating experience to help people internalize it and harness their superpower. So that's one place if you want to hear more about it, is my podcast. If people wanted to get in touch with me, my website right now is through my group practice. So it's Castlebrook Counseling in Westboro, Massachusetts. And so if you email info@castlebrookcounseling.com, or if you go on our website, there's a contact form, and you can just fill that out, and that'll come right to that email, and I'll pick it up there.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely make sure to link up the podcast so people can find it. But Kerrie, I have a final question for you. Knowing what you know now, even though we said we can't go back, okay, if you could go back to younger you and give yourself a piece of advice or encouragement, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah. I would go back and say exactly what the name of the podcast is. It makes sense that you feel this way.
It makes sense you feel this way.
Right. And you have a gift that other people don't have. And if I had had that awareness and that understanding about myself and my own sensitivities earlier in my life, it would have been like, I wouldn't change how life has happened. Right. And I think that's the, the thing that a lot of people say, these really painful things that have happened in life, if given the opportunity to go back and change them, they wouldn't, because we learn so much from them. Yeah. Right. And so
but it's still that one encouragement. You're like, it makes sense. If nobody else is telling you this, I just want to tell you, younger you, it makes sense you feel this way. And one day You are going to figure out how to harness this gift.
Yeah.
And that's where I just want to acknowledge you, Kerrie, for just not only coming on the podcast today, but I will say, I remember when we first met, you do just have this light about you that is very, you are attuned to people. And I just want to acknowledge you that you eventually realized that it does make sense that you feel this way.
Yep.
And you didn't stop there. You said, hey,
Yep.
I've realized that this is my sensitivity superpower, but I also want people to uncover theirs.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you coming on and sharing because I feel like there's going to be people that listen that say, oh my gosh,
light bulbs.
She's talking about me.
Yep. Light bulbs everywhere. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's why I'm spreading the message, right? Because so many of us self-invalidate because we think there's something wrong with us. So when we recognize that it's not, it's a gift, and up to like 33% of the general population has a higher sensitivity to emotion. There's a lot of us.
That's right.
Right.
So that means that if there's a lot of you, it's just who you are. It doesn't mean that there's anything, about that's wrong or bad or negative or anything like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, Inspiring Possible listeners, y'all know I like to leave y'all with a little tidbit, and I hope you're leaving with a lot of tidbits. But one of the things that I hope you take from what Kerrie talked about today is to really tune into who you are and to validate those feelings and how you feel and acknowledge yourself for the unique person you are, because your superpower is going to be the thing that helps you create possibilities. Until next time.
That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.